I want to talk with you about a number of subjects that directly affect the future of the United States.
Folks, your old pal Moore here, coming back at you from the Fireside Chats. Apologies for the extended delay on my part, but we need to discuss something that's been developing and breaking this whole week. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Donald Trump launched a major military operation in Venezuela last weekend, resulting in the kidnapping of then President Maduro. Now, we're going to discuss here today, we're going to discuss the military aspect of this, we're going to discuss the political aspect, both domestic and international, and we're going to discuss a slight historical context that I think some people have been missing here greatly. I'm going to provide you some other resources, good content creators on YouTube that I have seen kind of break down certain aspects of this entire news story. But what's important to remember is that none of this exists in a vacuum, which is something I think that most media and media personalities are kind of skimming over this whole thing. Donald Trump launched a military operation, kidnapped Maduro. Everybody goes home. Also, it's about the oil. Also, it's supposedly criminal. And by the way, we're no longer launching a military operation as of today. It's very confusing. We need to break it down step by step as best we can. The thing I want to talk about is the good. We have to be objective here on the Fireside Chats. We are fair and balanced after all. Now, objectively, this was a kick-ass operation for the military. It went off almost without a hitch. I can't remember the last time a military operation has gone so successfully or so well planned. It is comparable somewhat to the Navy SEAL raid on the Osama bin Laden compound that no casualties were reported at that time. I think the only thing we had then was a downed helicopter due to mechanical issues. Here, none of that happened. It was phenomenal. No U.S. casualties reported. A couple of minor injuries from gunfire from last I saw. And the mission was an overall success. You saw joint military operations with the FBI and other law enforcement, which is kind of a red flag. We'll get back to that. But on a technical standpoint, this showed the U.S. military kicking ass. Now, you're going to see right-wing media, specifically Trump and all the Fox News types, they're going to report on this in two different ways. Trump is going to say, as he's already said, that, oh, I have saved the military. This is Trump's military. Congratulations. So I'm going to speak from personal experience, which I have not done much in the past. This is horse shit. This is not Trump's military. This is the military of decades of bureaucracy, but other administrations as well. Generations, in fact, going all the way back to Obama, even Trump's first term, and Biden in this last presidency. The folks that were involved in this military operation would have been career military, had been in 4 or 5 years at least, if not longer, meaning they would have served during Biden, they would have served possibly even during Trump's first term. The point being is that the forces involved had nothing to do with Trump's military. This is what Trump's military will look like. And I'll get back to this monstrosity-looking motherfucker. Don't you worry now. What Trump's military has supposedly done is cultural BS issues. Banning trans people from the military, banning celebration of certain events with military hours or resources. Little caveat on that. All cultural, all, again, Twitter headlines. They haven't made a major impact in anything except troop morale one way or the other. It's not changed the fundamental structure or core of the military. Ain't nothing been done differently. If this operation had been launched a year and a half ago under Biden, it would have been just as successful, I guarantee that, because all the people involved would have been there under Biden and beforehand. Even in some of the upper echelons of the officer corps, you would have seen the same people there 10 years ago. Ain't nothing Trump done made a difference. A big aspect that they were focused on is PT standards and shaving waivers. So allowing military troops to have facial hair in case of medical reasons if they can't shave properly. That's been their big hootenanny. The Delta Force was not under their radar for this. Delta Force has kept the damn PT standards. They didn't change in the last year. That would have made a significant difference. They haven't gotten rid of their freaking shaving. It's horse shit. That is what they're talking about. There's been the only real changes that have come down from upper leadership. It's horse shit. This is not Trump's military. This is the usual military you saw 3 or 4 years ago. Now, on that aspect of the military success, you will see Trump reemphasize this. You will see, and you have seen conservative media reemphasize this, kind of tacking on to the whole military is back aspect. That has to do with a bit of our failures in how media reports on things and media literacy in the West or America as a whole. You see, we have, quote unquote, had a weak military following the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was seen as a major political military blunder for the United States. We lost the country, the Taliban won, blah, blah, blah. The Taliban control of Afghanistan is mostly because of political reasons. The logistical aspect of the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a quote-unquote military success, where the mission parameters were succeeded and expanded due to the circumstances and done with absolute fucking phenomenability. That's not a word, but they were done excellently. You see, we had a multinational force. It was us and the Brits as well, pulling troops as well as people out of Afghanistan using a supply chain that went halfway around the world and using different resources to get those people out. Now, I helped, not directly, but on the peripherals of this mission. I saw the support that was offered and even assisted in certain amounts of it. That is a overall success of the U.S. military and how they responded to a rather bad and disastrous situation. But what you saw reported in the media as a whole, on Twitter by Russia bots and all that, was U.S. military weak. U.S. military can't even leave a country without chaos. War is chaos. Congratulations, the U.S. military responded effectively, and we managed to transport thousands of people, countries, time zones, hemispheres away, and overall a success without the collapse of our country. Cough, cough, Soviet Union. They were right on your damn border and you managed to collapse after your invasion of Afghanistan. So what you see in the press is this report that, oh, military now strong again. You saw similar reporting and a similar narrative developed during the first Gulf War. In fact, much of the video behind me is going to be from that war because there are a lot of similarities we can see, especially over the last 30, 40 so years. Good Lord, 40 years. 30, 40 so years of U.S. military history. That war was seen as a response and a success, saying that the U.S. military was strong again after Vietnam, and we were no longer afraid to use military force because of our political instability after during the Vietnam War, I should say. Now, since then, and especially you saw the success of the first Gulf War, the military has been a rather kick-ass machine, putting it objectively. It has succeeded in its missions repeatedly, and it remains the most professional fighting force in the world. There's a reason that Russia is on year 5 of their 5-day military operation. There's a reason that China is sitting there trying to figure out how to invade Taiwan, because they ain't ever conducted a military operation like that. We have been doing this since freaking Tripoli with the Marines back in the day of the 1800s. The U.S. military was never weak. That was the propaganda and the political narrative that the media would report, but not the actual factuality of the situations. Now, this can be seen left and right as kind of a good thing, apolitically as I can be on this, that, hey, you know, Russia, China, congratulations, we can still do this, so don't try us. That is a objectively good thing because it puts the quote-unquote enemies of the United States on check, saying, you may think we're weak because your president is cuckoo Cocoa Puffs, but we still can perform a military operation with success. You're going to see certain people on YouTube, especially, or even in other narrative spaces, say that this military operation was conducted to put China on check. It wasn't. That is a political narrative. That is horseshit. That is reaching for flies that don't exist. Ain't no goddamn way. The overall goal of this operation was to capture Maduro, and that was a success. But the political mission afterwards has proven to be a complete, for lack of a better term, shit show. Let's also discuss some of the political ramifications for the Venezuelans themselves. Now, more than likely, you have seen in Venezuela, there more likely was a positive support for the military operation. I have a Venezuelan friend who is a expat. He lives in a different country now than Venezuela. He was very surprised because he still has family in the country, and he was very surprised about how this entire thing happened. I speak again on the professionalism of the United States military. He was at first very concerned, logically so. Your country's being attacked. It makes sense. But he was expecting what you saw in the media for Gaza. A complete bombardment, destruction of a country, a lot of people. Even on the U.S.'s worst day, the military still takes as best care as it can to limit, on a whole, to limit the amount of collateral damage. I say that knowing that there are incidents in the past, even of recent history, of the military not doing this, but you have to compare it to what, say, countries like Russia have done, which is not the same thing. Ukraine, as an example, has conducted their military in much the same standards as NATO, tried to limit collateral damage and focus on military targets and resources, same as the military did in Venezuela during this attack. So once the dust had cleared, he told me a lot of his family, who were initially frightened, were actually kind of surprised by how quickly it was over and how little the damage happened. There were reports of casualties, of course. We can't really trust what the Venezuelan government says because, surprise, surprise, it's still the same government that Maduro was leading. Overall, you're probably going to see positive reinforcement from the Venezuelan people. A little bit of a caveat on that is you're not seeing, as Elon Musk reshared on Twitter, Venezuelans in the streets celebrating this, because the government that Maduro led, that was oppressing the people, is still there. It didn't leave. The vice president, now President Rodriguez, was Maduro's pick. She is going to be keeping the same apparatus that oppressed the people that Maduro had. There will be no change in leadership. In fact, you saw today, in case I didn't mention it earlier, that Donald Trump has canceled the planned secondary attack to Venezuela. You have seen Venezuelans in America very much in support of this type of attack, or at least removal of Maduro from power. In a historical context, you see a similar type of mentality from Cuban Americans who were angry that the Kennedy administration failed in the Bay of Pigs invasion and that they just let Castro rise to power in Cuba. You saw a similar ground support in Panama during Operation Just Cause when the Bush administration went to Panama back in the late 80s. However, and this is the issue when you allow the Twitter-in-chief headlines to take over everything, nothing is going to change immediately on the ground. The Trump administration has created this narrative that they are going to go in and control Venezuela, that they are going to take the oil. You see, this is the culmination of Donald Trump from 2016, who said,
"We should have kept the oil in Iraq."
congratulations, you have just redone Iraq. We are seeing the culmination here of a media propaganda machine very much in line with the Russian propaganda machine, where they will stick out whichever narrative and just stick to the one that they makes the most sense at the time and place. Russian invasion of Ukraine was about NATO expansion. It was actually about biolabs. It was actually about oil. It was actually about the Nazis in Ukraine. Everything they needed in order to justify their actions after the fact, when their only action was, we're going to go in there and take over land and resources. We're going to go over in there and destroy our political opponents. That was their goal. You see Donald Trump doing the same thing. It's about oil. It is not about the criminality of it. If it was about the criminality or the drugs, then guess what? He wouldn't have pardoned the Honduran president for doing the same goddamn thing. In fact, Donald Trump said after he pardoned the president of Honduras, who was convicted of smuggling drugs into the United States, if somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life. Most of y'all know that already, especially those of you who've been a little bit more literate on the recent news happenings. But don't let it get lost in the headlines. Please just focus on the facts of the situation. Donald Trump started this escalation in Venezuela by attacking boats coming out of Venezuela that were supposedly running drugs. This operation reemphasizes and proves the operation to kidnap Maduro, that the U.S. military could have continued the general military, the law enforcement mission of taking those boats, capturing the people smuggling drugs, and then using them to either leverage for more information. Instead, what the Trump administration did was they just bombed the boats. Now, the Trump administration never provided evidence when requested by Congress of the actual facts regarding these boats. There was no evidence given that they were actually smuggling drugs. In fact, the act of them destroying these boats destroys any evidence that there were drugs on these boats. They could have, as we had done for decades, taken U.S. Special Forces, attacked these boats in that manner instead of missiles, taken the people into custody, and then said, hey, where did you smuggle these drugs from? Where did these boats come from? Provide us that evidence and we will, lighten your sentence. And congratulations, you have continued the war on drugs. And instead, What they wanted was a explosive headline. They want people to, one, just be distracted from all the other domestic issues that he is causing, the Epstein files, the increase in grocery prices, all of that. And they will have this big explosive headline: we killed all this fentanyl coming to the United States, despite the fact that Venezuela is a minority of where fentanyl comes from. A majority of the drugs still come from the southern border via Mexico, via places like Honduras, and all the way from China. And you look at this, in 2019, during Trump's first term, you saw that a majority of the drugs entered through Mexico and through China. And surprisingly, we're actually starting to come from India as well. We're not launching a freaking mission to take down Xi Jinping in China. That ain't going to happen because Venezuela was weak. The reason we went to Venezuela, the reason Trump is there, is because of the oil. It is not because of a law enforcement mission. It's horse crap. Nobody is crying that Maduro was in fact taken into custody. A bad man is getting what's coming to him. If the Trump administration, if Republicans cared about criminal justice, about enforcing the laws, they wouldn't have pardoned all the people on January 6th. And I will say that till I'm blue in the face, because they were convicted of crimes. Trump has pardoned numerous people convicted of crimes. And again, I repeat myself, the president of Honduras. He is doing that because he is a criminal president. The invasion, this attack itself, was more than likely illegal on numerous different accounts. And I'm going to explain why. Domestically, for a military force act of war, that is done via Congress. That is established in the Constitution. Now, we have in the last 30 years, especially during the War on Terror, moved away from the president saying, actually, you know what, let's go ahead and just use this force here without contacting Congress about it. However, the argument for that is slim. We should not be doing that. We should be including Congress. The president should be not acting unilaterally. That's how you get a dictator, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason we have checks and balances. There's a reason that the president is not the unilateral power in the country. This attack itself was done without authorization for Congress. Now, there have been examples in the past of the president doing something similar without an authorization. Notably, I should say, Operation Just Cause, not the video game, but in fact the military operation in Panama under the first Bush administration, the Papa Bush, was done without authorization from Congress. The differences here is the fact that, one, the country of Panama had been taken over by a dictator relatively recently and declared quote-unquote act of war against the United States. The U.S. had military and personnel in the area due to the Panama Canal. After the fact, Congress, bipartisan, also passed basically a, hey, you did okay, Papa Bush. Don't worry about it. We supported you. We would have supported you had you told us. Again, it's one of those gray areas that unfortunately in the latter half of the 20th century, the entirety of the 20th century to be honest with you, and the 21st century, we have moved away from Congress' historical point or intended purpose of declaring the authorization for military force. That being said, there have still been congressional oversights of the military force that Congress has seemingly stepped back from enforcing. I have seen somebody say is that the Obama administration conducted extrajudicial executions of American nationals who had aligned with the Taliban in his administration. That is true. He did do that. However, he did that with the explicit authorization of Congress. Trump did not. Trump just authorized these attacks. He had no oversight in Congress. So we have to take him and his administration's words that this was all for the good of the country, when he has said repeatedly, actually, we're just going to take all the oil. They said that, oh, we're actually going to pay for this entire military operation with the oil proceeds we got from Venezuela. No, the American people are not going to see a goddamn dime of that oil. The oil companies are, and everybody knows that. That's the reason you see certain aspects of MAGA a little bit hesitant on our foreign policy here. And even then, that's if the country itself, with the current leadership, who was, and I cannot express this enough, all still there, all still worked for Maduro, are suddenly going to be like, actually, yes, we will go sell you oil to the United States. That money is not going to go to the rest of the United States. It's going to stay in the pockets of the elite. We lied about why we went to Iraq, to give money to the elite. And congratulations, we lied about why we're in Venezuela, to give money to the elite. But surprise, surprise, we're not actually in Venezuela. You see, bombing a country, kidnapping a leader is apparently easy. Nation building, which is what Trump has proposed, is hard. That requires work. That requires a long-term military solution. And if we actually stayed in Venezuela like we did Iraq, which is what it seemed like for a couple of days we were going to do, well, then we're going to get Iraq 2.0 in South America. You want to make the country more unstable, which would only increase the amount of immigrants and refugees who attempt to flee, therefore destabilizing other countries and creating a cascading effect that will again reach the southern border. Congratulations, you've done that. Do you want to create an area of chaos and have these narco-terrorist gangs you're all so scared of gain more power and influence? Congratulations, you've done that. That's what happened with Iraq. That's the reason ISIS came about. Headed son of a bitch, Stephen Miller. Now, he's made a lot of the policy decisions for the Trump administration. He's the chief of staff of the White House, and he's been Trump's longest ally that I can recall that's still actively performing politics in this term as well as Trump's first term. Stephen Miller has before said that the president has the authority to act in a excuse my goddamn French, I can't pronounce for shit today.
Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority,
Stephen?
The president has plenary authority.
Which means, in case you didn't know, full, complete, unrestricted power or authority. Now, he said this on CNN before choking up like the camera-sized son of a bitch that he supposedly is. What Stephen Miller is saying is that Trump can do whatever he wants, consequences be damned. Now, in regards to the Venezuela debacle and how it relates to the loss of U.S. soft power in exchange for a temporary use of hard power, Stephen Miller says, actually, we have the right to take over Greenland. He said, and I'm quoting him directly here, we live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, governed by power. And ladies and gentlemen, what he is decrying is that the United States has the authority, should it so choose, to take over Greenland militarily. Republicans have learned nothing from their history, in fact, because we had the authority to go over for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and we were there for way too freaking long. We had the authority to do all this, and we can only do this. The United States is strong. The United States can do whatever the hell it wants. For those of you that don't know, soft power is essentially what the United States has that are non-traditional means of power, authority, or even goodwill. For example, everybody in the world loves American rock and roll. Go overseas, you're going to see American rock and roll played in discotheques. If the United States said, hey, actually, we want a little bit more business with your country, why don't you do that, or we'll start importing or exporting rock and roll, well, then those people are going to be like, oh my God, we love American rock and roll. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of this or that. That's how American soft power works in a nutshell. Now, it's a lot more complicated than that. We use a lot of foreign aid, other things I've mentioned before on this channel to provide goodwill. That is what makes American hard power, the military apparatus, so effective. You remember that mission we launched in Iran, the one that supposedly destroyed their nuclear stores forever and we're never going to deal with that problem again? That was only able to be done because of America's soft power, because we had a bunch of other countries in the area and around that were willing to assist the United States for us to be able to launch a freaking bomber all the way from here to freaking here in Timbuktu. Actually, Timbuktu is down there, but this plot over here on the map. That can only be done if we maintain soft power. Because if we start pissing off our allies, if we start going after things like NATO, well then congratulations. You no longer have a military base in Greenland, you have a military occupation. It is important that we maintain control over the Arctic Circle, as especially climate change gets worse and Russia becomes an increased threat. That is why Trump is going after Greenland. There is also resources in Greenland that the Danish government and the Greenland government have said, hey, we will help you get. But now we have, this is Stephen Miller's wife who posted this, by the way, a podcaster who I'm sure works very hard for all of her money, that we are actually by force going to take over Greenland. We are by force going to destroy the best military alliance just because we need a military base in Greenland. We need military control of Greenland. Congratulations, folks. We already have military control of Greenland. We can put anything we want there military-wise. They are part of NATO. We have a military base there. What do you want Greenland? Oh, you want Greenland for the oil and resources, isn't it? Ain't that a goddamn kick in the bucket? You want to solve the issue of drugs in America, you could more easily and cheaply do it by taking care of the drug addicts in this country, by treating it as the mental health issue that it is, and not criminalizing everybody for their poverty-stricken lives. It would be cheaper. Hell, it'd probably be easier too. But it's not as flashy as just hitting the big red button and going to knock, knock, hey, Maduro, we're here. You want to solve the issue of resource scarcity in this country? You would invest in alternatives rather than just going to take all the oil whenever you can. You want to solve the issue of America's foreign defense? Well, guess what? You use your freaking allies, those resources that have been built up over generations, from Ronald Reagan to FDR to, God help me, I hate saying his name, Woodrow Wilson. The presidents that helped secure these alliances that made us the most powerful military in the freaking world. Already you have seen the United Kingdom cancel their operations with the United States over intelligence sharing as well as military operations in the Caribbean. That makes us weaker. Imagine, if you would, an MI6 operative by the dashing name of 007 suddenly discovers an imminent terrorist attack against the United States, originating from somewhere in Venezuela. What has happened in the past is that information would be shared with the United States as well as all other intelligence agencies as what's part of the Five Eyes alliance. But Trump has put that alliance at jeopardy. Now, this alliance deals with the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, most of the English-speaking world, in which we all share intelligence openly and treat all these other agencies as equals. Because of his actions beforehand, the UK has already pulled themselves out of this alliance sharing intelligence gathering because of the drama in the Caribbean. Now, most of this intelligence is directly towards the Caribbean. So say tomorrow the UK finds out there's an ISIS terrorist attack from sources in the Middle East, they'll probably tell the United States still. But that alliance is in jeopardy. UK, France, and Germany have all pledged to defend Denmark in the event of military aggression into NATO. And I understand, yes, we have a military that could probably take out the rest of the world with an arm behind our back. But Stephen Miller, the one who says force and might makes right, is not going to be the one on the front lines in that us versus everybody war. He's going to be sitting in his nice, cushy little office, being a little squeaker that he is. He sits there, like many of these elitists, and he talks about, we are the greatest nation on earth. He contributed nothing to this country. He sits there on the success of others, on immigrants, on the working man, you and me, black and white all over. And he sits there and says all of this while he himself has contributed nothing and in fact made us weaker. It is easier for us to make friends and use those friends for our own protection and defense. What Trump has done in Venezuela undermines that ability to do. If he continues down the road, which I don't think he's going to do, it seems like he's going to pull us back a little bit from the precipice of war. But if he continues down the end of just bombing who the hell he feels like, we're going to run into further issues. And again, we can spend all this money, go and fight the world to get stuff that we already have access to, or we could just spend that money at home trying to fix up our stuff and not trying to do Iraq 2.0. Now, the administration has claimed that the current vice president in charge, who again is the same person that was working for Maduro, will capitulate to all of the U.S.'s demands, or I guess will kidnap her too, even though the United States under Biden and Trump recognized Mercado as the opposition leader, as newly elected leader of Venezuela. She don't matter now either. I'm going to address some of the arguments you're going to see from those on the right. One, the Venezuelan people wanted this. Yes, they did. You saw the same kind of numbers after Panama. You saw the same kind of celebrations after Iraq. The people there didn't like the government in charge. It doesn't matter if the U.S. was the good guys or bad guys. They were just happy to see the oppressor be overthrown or taken out. Yeah, congratulations. What happened after Iraq? Did they like us staying there forever? Did they like our boots on the ground? Was it all hunky-dory after the people there celebrated the downfall of Saddam Hussein? Oh, yes, the Venezuelans today are extraordinarily happy. Undoubtedly. I'm not going to argue that fact in too much detail. I've heard from it firsthand. I support U.S. military operations to take down dictators at the behest of international law and cooperation with other countries. Donald Trump is not doing that. Donald Trump is saying, actually, I don't like you today, so we're just going to take you out because you're our boogeyman. Because you saw Venezuela was the boogeyman of this last election. Now, one of the arguments you'll probably see a lot of people making, especially if I get any comments on this video, is that, oh, Trump launched a perfect military operation and we're not going to put boots on the ground. He is stuck in the same trap that the Bush administration was in the early 2000s, with an undefined mission objective, unclear goals, and a fuck it, I guess we'll ball. The initial operation to take down Iraq, the Second Gulf War, was phenomenally done. Yeah, we took down Iraq. We destroyed their leadership. But the political mission afterwards was horse shit because we didn't have a prerogative. We took down Saddam Hussein. You didn't find weapons of mass destruction. And then what? Silence? Secondary attacks? Let's hope they play ball? Who knows? But we're creating the same farcical that we did back then. As a quick aside, I also want to point out there are reports that apparently people have been profiting over Trump's decision-making on insider trading and such. We don't know who did this, but when you consider the fact that Trump has manipulated the stock market and basically told people, hey, you should buy today, wink, wink, and suddenly in the White House tell them, hey, you just made $1 million. Congratulations. You're welcome, by the way. By announcing tariffs and then dismissing tariffs at whim, it's really hard not to imagine that somebody in the administration is profiting off of this. When you consider the fact that Trump announced on Truth Social that he is going to have a e-currency bidding market, same way as the poly market has been. Wow, I wonder who's financially invested in making rash decisions that are going to cost lives and money for the American taxpayers, all because he can make a quick buck off of 20% odds that he'll capture Maduro tomorrow. I'm going to wrap up here, folks, with just a call to action from all of you. Please share this video, share the information, talk to your friends and family. Don't just let them feed the media ecosystem with the false information. Because if you only look at Donald Trump's Twitter feed, his Truth Social, and that's all where you're going to get your news from, we're screwed. You have to talk to people and you have to do it in a good manner so that way they can see these things happening. But as long as we have the ability to speak freely and convince our neighbors, we have a chance to pull it back from the brink. I have to believe that. We have to use that information space, and we have to make sure that they don't just control everything. Don't just stay in your algorithm bubbles. Go out and talk to people. Share videos like this. Share videos like From the Soy Pill. So that way, folks, have more information out. As always, this has been the Fireside Chats. Watch this space. Please like, share, subscribe with your friends.